welcome to another episode of Start Small. And I'm going to apologize ahead of time because my little yippy yappy dog is out here barking today, but I need to get this recorded, so we may be interrupted. Just saying. So I'm Laura, Microbiz chick, and I'm glad that you are here for this podcast. And today I'm going to share my story. Last time I told you I was going to tell you how I got started in business as a single mom and of a really little guy. He was just entering school age. And my passion, I'm just going to tell you up front, I actually gave up a really fantastic career. It was a job I loved. And then even after that, I had a job offer with a startup company that ended up doing really well. And I turned it down because my passion has always been to be a wife and a mother. And unfortunately, I went through a couple divorces, one when my son was just a few months old, another when he was just a little tyke. So, all that to say, that didn't work out real well for me. And so I think a lot of women, and this is no criticism of anybody at all. I just, as a single mother myself, a young woman with a really young child, who gave up a lot for a dream to be a stay-at-home mom and to even homeschool. When I found myself being a single mom, I was not going to give that up. I was just determined. And some of the other single moms I was running into just adopted the idea that, well, now they have to go back to work. They have to get daycare. They have to do this. And I'm not criticizing those women that did do that. I'm just saying that I made the decision. I was like, I don't want to adopt that mindset. And I wanted to do whatever I could to be able to stay at home and raise my son and homeschool him. I didn't want anybody else raising him, even my own family. Not that they couldn't do it, but I saw myself, he was my son. I wanted to be the one that raised him. And so that was my mindset, that I was going to do whatever it took to make that happen. And after my divorce, I literally had nothing. I had to sell. I had a really nice vehicle, and I sold it in order, because I didn't have a job. I couldn't get rent. Nobody would rent to me. So I sold my really nice vehicle that was paid off, and with that money paid rent up front for 6 months. I went to found someone who was willing for me to pay rent up front, and I thought that would give me enough time to kind of get things together. And so I did that. And I didn't find, I started down the road of looking for work, but my heart was, I just couldn't do it. I could not leave my son. And this was also about the time that my son was diagnosed with Asperger's. I knew there was something going on. So all of this was happening at the same time. I had just gotten this new diagnosis, which made me just want to keep him closer even all the more. And things weren't working out. I didn't have any source of income, really. I had been selling clothes through a direct sales company. The name was Cabby. In fact, I'm wearing a Cabby jacket right now. And it was really fantastic. I actually made quite a bit of money doing that. Not a ton, though. And then but the way they were set up, they would shut down a couple months out of the year between seasons, which meant no income. And then I had to purchase the next season's rack, which was about, back then in the early 2000s, it was $3,000. That's still a lot of money. That was a ton of money back then. And as a single mom, with that being my only income, I didn't have that money. And so I actually was unable to renew my contract with them because I was unable to purchase the the racks, which was required. And I didn't have the money for that. So I had to find something else. And I knew it came to a point where I knew I wasn't going to be able to pay my rent. And but instead of waiting till after rent was due or even right at that time, I saw ahead of time, look, this is not going to happen. And so as soon as I realized that I wasn't going to be able to pay my rent, I just really prayed. I mean, I was just a lot of prayer. What do I do? What do I do? So I went pretty much with hat in hand and went to my property manager and said, I'm not going to be able to pay my rent in this upcoming month. It was a couple weeks away. And I wanted to let you know ahead of time. And I asked, is there anything I can do in exchange for rent? Can I, any work you have in exchange for rent? And he was so gracious and said yes. I mean, it was a husband-wife team. And they came back to me and they said, if you will go paint one of our rental homes, we will cover your rent. I'm like, I can do that. So I took my little son, set up, some toys for him in the corner. I painted and cleaned this rental for them. They covered my rent. And then they said, would you like to do this on a regular basis? We have lots of rentals that need attention. And I'm like, yes. So that is how my first business was born. And I actually had to go register, set it up, do all the proper things. And out of that, I actually got another realtor contacted me and said, I hear you're doing this. I have some rentals. Would you be willing to clean or paint or whatever it is I need? And I'm like, yes. So I was able to do that. That was a provision that God gave me for my son and I. It was still very tight. We ate a lot of oatmeal. There were times I couldn't pay my utilities. There were times where I had no gas in my car. But it allowed me to stay at home and be with my son. And that was my very, very first business. And that's kind of what really set me on this course of being in business for myself. And one of the things I just, I really wanted to point out in telling you this story is I started small. I started with what was in my hand. And at that time, it was nothing. And even when I was cleaning the houses for people, I didn't go out and buy cleaning supplies. I had no money. When I say I had no money, I had no money. There were times where I didn't even have time to money to go to the grocery store. So I would look around my car seats or, wherever, and I would gather enough change. There was a McDonald's on the other side of the alley where I lived, and I could go get for $2.14 a little cheeseburger and a small fry. I would bring it home and I would split it, and my son and I would split it. And that was our meal. For $2.14, we would split that. That's how poor I was. However, I wasn't willing to give up on my dream to be at home with him. That meant more than anything. We had a warm home. We didn't have beds, but we slept on air mattresses, but we were warm and comfortable. I had a sleeping bag and I had an air mattress. We did not own a bed. So we slept on the floor on air mattresses for a couple years. We ate lots of oatmeal. God provided. There was one time I opened up the door and there was a bag of groceries on our doorstep. There was another time I opened up my mail and there was a check inside, or a refund check for something. I'm like, I don't even know what this is, but it paid for some food that week. There were times I would put my hand in my pocket and there would be cash, and that didn't happen all the time, but it did happen every once in a while. And it kind of was just to let me know that, God was watching out for me and taking care of me, and it kept me inspired to keep fighting to be with my son. And when I started that cleaning business, I just used the cleaning supplies I had in my house. And then when I started to make a little bit of money, I went out and bought some better cleaning supplies. I bought a little ladder, and that was about it. But I started with what I had, And I was able to humble myself. And that was the other thing that God really taught me in this is don't wait till it's too late. Don't wait till after the fact or when you can't do something. Like in this case, I went to my landlord and ahead of time, not after my rent was due and it was late. I went to him beforehand and said, I'm telling you, I know I'm not going to be able to pay my rent. What can I do? And then we work together for a solution, and people will respond to that. People will honor that. And so I just want to encourage you in that. Maybe your situation is not as dire as mine was back then, but how can my story apply to your situation? Maybe there's something that's really important to you and you don't see how that can happen. Pray and ask God, what do I have in my hand? What do I have in my home that I can lay down before you and you can multiply? That's why in the intro of these podcasts, it says, for those of you who see the visual ones, it says, start small, say yes, watch the increase. And that just means start with what's in your hand, say yes to God, and then watch Him multiply what you give to Him. So that's my story of getting started. That's my story of the Lord teaching me about starting with what's in my hand, which was starting very small, and also watching Him multiply what we think we don't have. So thanks so much for watching today. Be sure to subscribe to my podcast. Also, be sure, here's a couple of things. Be sure to go to my website, PAOLA.com, and subscribe to my magazine. This is another great Start Small story, and we'll get there in one of these episodes. I'm kind of starting early in my story, and we'll work my way up to how I ended up at Paola Lane. But really want you, please go check out my magazine. That would mean the world.